Marhaba, welcome everybody. This is Cynthia Samson from Mayan Arab News Magazine, Istanbul, Turkey, and Decode39 News Agency, Italy. So here are top 4 news of the week from Decode39 News Agency, Italy in English language. So here are as follows. So countering jihadist terrorism, the Corpusal report. Second news comes that is from Turkey. So Sultan Erdogan is moving away from the West. Third news comes that is from Italy. So Italian government is aiming to host the major Intel plant. And the fourth news comes that is the Draghi approach faces the final G20 trial en route. So here are all the details.
Italian government's aiming to host major Intel plant. Reuters confirmed talks between the Italian government and the American titan Intel to build a massive microchip packaging plant in Turin. Here's how Prime Minister Draghi and Minister Giorgetti plan to turn Italy into a European semiconductor hub. Italy and Germany are leading the race to host two major microchip production plants for the American company Intel. Reuters unveiled the Italian government's behind-the-scenes work to close a multi-billion euro deal that would turn Italy into an international hub for semiconductors. Mario Draghi's government is reportedly finalizing the details of a plan to convince Intel, the largest US chipmaker, to invest billions of euros in an advanced chip-making plant in Italy, while Germany is favored to host an even larger mega factory. The Italian plant could have an estimated value of euro 4 billion. Although the final figure could be even higher, sources with knowledge of Dozier told Decode39 this would be the centerpiece of Intel's European expansion along with the German plant. Contacts between the German government and the company led by Pat Gelsinger are at an advanced stage. In all likelihood, the German foundry will be built in the Dresden area, the beating heart of the European chip industry, home to other sectorial giants such as Infineon and the American Global Foundries. Italy, on the other side, aims to land an advanced packaging facility, a cutting-edge factory used to assemble smaller components into full-fledged chips. It's a technology Intel uses to attract new customers such as Amazon's cloud computing unit, and it does not have a European plant yet. Mr. Draghi's government has been working on securing the deal for months. The PM received Mr. Gelsinger in July, and another visit is expected in the coming weeks. Giancarlo Giorgetti, Minister for the Economic Development, is also liaising with the Silicon Valley giant. He just came back from a mission to the US, and as his team confirmed, the Intel dossier was on the agenda. In early October, the minister said that at least 4 Italian industrial sites could be chosen for the Intel factory. Among these, the historic Mirafiori plant in Turin would be ideal, but Catania, where the construction of a microchip plant for the Franco-Italian company STM is already planned, is also being considered. The government aims to close the deal by year's end, according to the Reuters article, which also explained that new plant could create 1,000 new jobs. The European plants are part of Intel's massive investment plan that could amount to 80 billion euros over the next 10 years. Caught between the pandemic and the shortening of global tech supply chains, the semiconductor industry at the center of an international dispute between China and US, who are vying for the control of major manufacturing sites, particularly in Southeast Asia and in Taiwan, home of the world's leading chipmaker TSMC. Today, Europe is a second-rate player in the semiconductor industry. The bloc excels in highly specialized sectors, as is the case with the Dutch ASML, Infineon and STM, but it cannot boast companies capable of producing chips on a global scale. Speaking in Parliament last week, Mr. Draghi called on the EU to act now and decisively to boost growth in the chip market and meet the set target of reaching 20% of global production by 2030. The Draghi approach faces final G20 trial in Rome. The Italian PM's brand of pragmatic multilateralism and his possible role as the new European center of gravity will thoroughly tested at the final G20 summit in Rome this weekend. And while Russia and China tend to disengage, the breadth of global challenges is requiring countries to step up. Here's a rundown. The world's major economies are poised to converge on Rome for the final G20 summit. The working meetings of the heads of state and government will run on October 30th and 31st and culminate in a joint communique supposedly setting out a set of shared aims and cooperative paths to reach them. But amid conflicting worldviews and a few missing leaders, the road is uphill. West and multilateralism. G20 member states, along with other nations and international institutions, have worked throughout the year upholding the People Planet Prosperity slogan as their North Star to navigate the plethora of issues facing the modern world, the pandemic, global vaccination and economic recovery efforts, as well as climate change and international crisis, Afghanistan above all. Meanwhile, the relationships between democratic and autocratic global powers are soaring. The latter point will undoubtedly be among the toughest nuts to crack. The Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi is aiming to foster a joint, truly multilateralist answer to the multilateral issues. At the same time, he champions Atlanticism and Europeanism as his foreign policy compass. And although he is uniquely positioned to heighten Italy's influence in the European sphere, what with German Chancellor Angela Merkel on her way out and French President Emmanuel Macron facing re-election in less than 6 months, his credentials are not winning over Russia and China. The Sino-Russian approach, there's an underlying reason for that. Both Moscow and Beijing often uphold multilateralism as an alternative to the Western-led world order, where their autocratic ambitions are met with condemnation and sanctions. And yet, when push comes to shove, neither truly engages in multilateral forums because they reject mediation with the West on issues such as human rights and the limits of national sovereignty. It's no coincidence that both the Russian and Chinese presidents, Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping, will not attend the Rome summit. The same playbook was employed 2 weeks ago when Mr. Draghi oversaw an extraordinary G20 summit on Afghanistan and emphasized the need to include key regional players such as Russia, China, and Pakistan to support meaningful action and avert a humanitarian catastrophe in the making. Measures Putin and Xi skipped the meeting, opting to send lower-ranking representatives, and the former even announced an alternative talk in Moscow to be held a week later and featuring the as of yet unrecognized new rulers of Afghanistan, the Taliban. And while both the EU and the US announced extra humanitarian funds, adding up to over Euro 1 billion, Russia and China rowed in the opposite direction towards unfreezing internationally held funds and financing for the Taliban. Climate and pandemic. Something similar is happening on the environmental front. The G20 will function as an unofficial prelude to next week's COP26 climate conference in Glasgow, which scientists are calling humanity's last chance to adopt tougher mitigation measures and keep global warming from entering the worst-case tier. Measures Putin and Xi have elected once again to not be there in person, as their countries belong to the list of those who fail to sufficiently strengthen their climate pledge. Their absence is both sobering and unsurprising. On the other hand, the West is presenting a more coordinated and ambitious front on most issues, from climate change to Afghanistan and the pandemic. The President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, has already declared that the bloc is set to ship an additional 500 million doses to vulnerable countries. She added that other countries must come forward, which is why she is working closely with Prime Minister Draghi and President Biden to gather G20 leaders next week at the Rome summit behind the ambitious goal of defeating the global pandemic, COVID measures, and security. Of all places, Italy is on the global front line with regard to COVID. Not only is the country among the most vaccinated, more than 86% of over 12s have had at least one jab. Its implementation of a sanitary green pass to access workplaces is a world-leading effort. This did not occur without troubles. Anti-green pass manifestations are occurring regularly, and although they tend to be relatively small and contained, one of them turned violent due to extreme right writers. The symbolic meaning and mediatic attention around the Roman summit could elicit a mixture of anti-establishment protests ranging from the far left to the far right and encompassing anarchic, no global and black bloc protesters. Following that episode and the intelligence community's warnings, the Interior Ministry elected to increase security measures and took a harder line against potentially dangerous protests. Only safe, static, and far-away manifestations will be allowed in the upcoming weekend. Security will be guaranteed by over 2,500 personnel and a range of on-the-ground, below-ground, and online monitoring operations. The red zone, where world leaders will gather, will be protected by anti-drone systems, and no private vehicle will be able to drive there. The government's directive is clear: Rome must prove a safe and tranquil hub for the summit. Sultan Erdogan is moving away from the West. How will he explain the expulsion of Western diplomats at Rome G20? An analysis by Ambassador Marco Marcelli, scientific advisor at the ICSA Foundation, former permanent representative to the Council of Europe and director of global issues and G8G20 processes at Foreign Ministry, with an unprecedented decision both for the number of foreign diplomats involved and the motivation behind it. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan declared persona non grata 10 ambassadors residing in Ankara. It's the first step towards expulsion from the country to be carried out in a very short time. The new Sultan's axe struck the heads of mission of the United States, Canada, France, Germany, Finland, Denmark, Holland, Sweden, Norway, and New Zealand. They were guilty of signing an appeal for the liberation of anti-regime philanthropist Osman Kavala. The latter has been detained for over 4 years without trial in a maximum security prison, as authorities considered him an active supporter of Imam Fatahullah Gulen. His release was requested by a sentence of the European Court of Human Rights, which obviously remains unexecuted, pronounced in 2019 and confirmed in March 2020. Currently, an unspecified but nevertheless very high number of political prisoners in the tens of thousands is languishing in the Turkish prisons, representing almost all social classes and professions. Many of them are suspected of having been involved in the failed coup d'etat of summer of 2016. Osman Kavala is one of them. He is close to the Hungarian-American tycoon George Soros, whose organization, the Open Society Foundations, was banned from the country 3 years ago. He opposed Erdogan in 2013 too, when he led the popular protest on Gezi case, which revolved around a public park subject to real estate speculation, which was brutally repressed by police forces. As a professional entrepreneur, Mr. Kavala was never involved in political or party issues, and by general admission is devoid of ambitions in this regard. His profile doesn't seem to live up to the draconian measures adopted by Turkey, which are inevitably poised to create yet another deep rift between Anatolian authorities and West. However, this evaluation obviously does not take into account one interpretation of reality, that of the Turkish autocrat, which is increasingly unilateral and arbitrary, pushing him to impose his will, identified obviously with national interest, and ruthlessly eliminate any obstacle standing in his way. It's highly probable that domestic factors are not extraneous to Mr. Erdogan's attitude. Traditionally, the external enemy serves to divert attention from contingent problems, which in this case is a decidedly worrying economic situation. The logical consequence is the fact that at this particular moment almost no sector is protected from critical issues regardless of their importance along the main lines of Ankara's foreign policy. With regard to the US, a similar discourse applies to NATO. Their relations with Turkey appear heavily conditioned by Ankara's exclusion from F-35 fighters military cooperation program, which in turn is due to Turkey's previous and provocative purchase of the S-400 missile defense system from Russia. Contributing to the sheer coldness is also Washington's refusal to extradite Eman Gulen, seen as the mastermind of the failed coup. As far as the European Union is concerned, accession negotiations have stalled for years. The designation of Turkey as a candidate country dates back to 1999. Two events from the current year might have halted the process irreversibly: the pronouncement with which the European Parliament denounces Ankara's increasingly marked departure from the values and standards of the EU, and a more recent report by Brussels which, among other objections, expresses with full justification serious doubts about the independence of the Turkish judiciary. It is no coincidence that the President of European Parliament, David Sassoli, was among the first to react to Mr. Erdogan's new challenge, speaking of authoritarian drift. Meanwhile, the Council of Europe is faced with the umpteenth and contemptuous fin de non-receivor coming from a country which is always reluctant to implement its obligations but is still a full member state. The body could declare that its patience has exhausted and verified the possibility of carrying out the disciplinary procedures enshrined by its statutes. Turkey grants hospitality to nearly 4 million refugees, most of them Syrians, mostly thanks to generous funding from the EU. It also provided military support to the UN-backed government of Tripoli, without which General Haftar's troops would have ended up controlling the entirety of Libya. While holding some positive value, these two factors cannot counterbalance relations between Turkey and the West, which are strongly compromised and close to historical lows. This situation will be tested in a few days. On October 30th, 31st, President Erdogan is expected in Rome to participate in the G20 summit along with the other heads of state and government, a successful multilateral exercise. The Italian G20 presidency has been well received so far, particularly because of the attention it reserved for the Afghan dossier. If the new Sultan cannot escape from embarrassing explanations about the recent dramatic devaluation of the Turkish lira, the consequences of the new diplomatic stress test he boldly imposed on an already precarious background are uncertain. For his part, Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi, who will direct the final and most important event of the Italian-led G20 with his usual competence, will find confirmation for the definition he himself applied to Erdogan in the aftermath of the humiliation inflicted on the President of the EU Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, during her official visit to Turkey last April. A dictator is how Mr. Draghi described Mr. Erdogan back then, attracting wide-ranging criticisms for the undiplomatic, excessively outspoken language. 6 months later that unworthy episode, the facts are proving him entirely right. Countering jihadist terrorism, the Copasa report, jihadist terrorism is still looming according to a new report by the Italian Parliament's intelligence watchdog, which maps out why national legislation on de-radicalization along with better European cooperation is increasingly urgent. Jihadist terrorism remains a looming danger and national legislation on de-radicalization together with better European cooperation is increasingly urgent. This much was stated by Copasa, the intelligence watchdog committee within the Italian parliament. The body released a report detailing the plan for a more effective enforcement action to combat the phenomenon of jihadist radicalization, which is also based on the hearings carried out after NATO's withdrawal from Afghanistan. Copasa's president Adolfo Urso explained that new measures and lines of intervention have been identified to accentuate the effectiveness of preventive action. These may be implemented alongside measures of a repressive nature that are already enforced today. The way forward, the report, whose speakers are Enrico Borghi, Democratic Party, and Federica Dini, Five Star Movement, is an in-depth study that follows the hearings of the Interior and Justice Ministers, the Chief of Police, and the Commander of Carabinieri Police Force, as well as the directors of the Internal and Foreign Intelligence Agency. Repressive action is not enough, multiple tools are needed. Thus, as the speakers write, prevention, repression, and cooperation are the areas where to act with effective, far-sighted, and integrated interventions in order to combine the micro, that is, the individual, with the macro social cultural mechanism. According to the authors, this is the only way to implement effective prevention techniques in the fight against terrorism. Countering terrorism in Italy and across Europe. In its report, the committee underscored the urgent and no longer deferrable need to enact laws providing Italy with the capacity to counter the growing phenomenon of jihadist radicalization more incisively. De-radicalization is a full-fledged counter-terrorism policy. It's a real security tool for controlling and reducing the subversive threat and recruitment of European citizens by terrorist organizations. Reads the report, the internet is the crucial battlefield, but the schools, prisons, and meeting places are also key areas. Copasa proposed to criminally prosecute even the simple possession of propaganda material. This is currently unsanctioned in Italy, but such a measure could be modeled after the law on the possession of child abuse material. The aim is to intervene promptly on radicalized subjects even if they have not yet committed a crime. Furthermore, the report tackled the improvement of European collaboration in addition to contributions that EU member states sent to the Europol Intelligence and Situation Center. The committee recalled that the European Commission will soon produce a police cooperation code. This measure is geared towards improving cooperation and providing for the creation of a network of operators, including Europol, who will conduct investigations at the financial level in order to hit the flows that finance terrorism. The phenomenon's dimension. The murder of British MP David MS on October 15th was a recent instance of terrorism. Europol reported 10 jihadist attacks in 2020. Europe, with 12 dead and 47 wounded. Young age is a significant trend. Of the 254 arrests, overall 87% were males aged 31 and 32. Italy is in a much better situation than other states due to small dimension of Islamic communities and well-integrated third generations. Still, there were 71 expulsions for security reasons between August 1st, 2020 and July 31st, 2021. Drawing from the latest report from the Interior Ministry, the Copasa paper cites the presence of 144 foreign fighters, even though it is known that most of them are dead and that only a dozen are constantly monitored on Italian territory. The situation in prisons. Of the 60,000 detainees in Italy, 20,000 are foreigners, 13,000 come from Muslim countries, and 8,000 declare themselves Islamic. This data comes from a report by the European Foundation for Democracy and the Normo Center for Parliamentary Studies titled Understanding Jihadist Radicalization, the Italian case, according to the Department of Penitentiary Administration, whose most recent data dates back to October 15, 313 inmates were monitored and divided according to danger levels. 142 were considered high risk, 89 medium and 82 low. Algerians and Moroccans are the most represented with 27.1% and 25.8% respectively. The need for the response, the report stressed that it's essential to understand that the path through which people adopt beliefs that justify violence and how they translate thought into violent behavior in the process of radicalization. Several steps take on special importance, such as potential mobilization, whereby subjects with the same set of beliefs take on different roles and perform different types of action, and recruiting networks. The risk of lone wolves, individual actors, was reiterated in another recent parliamentary paper, which describes how the jihadist threat in Europe is characterized by predominantly endogenous and unstructured traits, which translates into autonomous activations on behalf of subjects which in the majority of cases are not linked with the terrorist groups but rather influenced or inspired by them. Internet and prisons are the main places where proselytism happens. The current framework: the 2015 Anti-Terrorism Decree and the 2016 ratification of international conventions are fixed points in the Italian legislation. At the European level, a law was approved last May to combat the spread of terrorist content online and to collaborate with website operators to remove that content. Italy also stands out for its anti-terrorism strategic analysis committee, promoting constant information exchange between police forces, intelligence agencies, and prison administration. The Copasar report recalls that countering violent extremism (CVE) programs have been active across the West for several years. Unlike some Islamic countries, Great Britain, Denmark, Holland, Sweden, Norway, Germany, and Canada employ them to rediscover de-radicalized Muslims and reintegrate them into society. Copasar wishes to audit PM Draghi. In the accompanying note, President also underlined his committee's wish to be able to audit Prime Minister Mario Draghi on the outcome of the 2021 G20 led by the Italian presidency. This edition of the series of high-level summits, which is nearing its end, saw the examination of international politics, security, and defense.
So this was Cynthia Samson from Mayan Arab News Magazine, Istanbul, Turkey, and Decode39 News Agency, Italy. Subscribe to my news channel for latest news updates in Hindi, English, and Arabic language. Thank you. Shukriya.